Welcome to the Unschooling the Mind podcast, where we unravel all of the beliefs and deep conditioning that has been programmed into our mind through decades of infiltration by institutions, media, and governments of whom we no longer trust. In an attempt to heal ourselves and free our children from the same circumstances, we bravely face the rabbit holes that we have been incessantly warned not to explore. My name is Tasha Fishman, and I was a regular Matrix mummy, previously trapped on planet mind control like everyone around me, until the absurdity of the 2020 mandates and public health measures which hit the school system. I took my kids running and never looked back. Unschooling them and myself has led to a new reality. I was forced to shed my old beliefs and birth a new version of myself, a former recovering people pleaser all the way to the Canadian trucker convoy. I didn't know this was in the cards, but here I am today as an unschooling advocate, public speaker, and the founder of the International Unschooling the Mind private community. My life is unrecognizable today, but I wouldn't change a thing. So let's get into it, friends, and unschool our minds together. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Unschooling the Mind. Thank you, Selvia Filteau. I'm glad I got that right this time. We're so happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us on the Unschooling the Mind podcast. Really excited because I had the opportunity to speak with you. I feel like we did a podcast ourselves because we were like, well, let's connect because you're in Costa Rica. And there we are on Zoom. And I could have talked to you for hours and hours and hours because you have an amazing story up here in Canada, ex-RCMP officer, married to an RCMP officer, left the country during the mandates, took your kids. You have had the dream experience. That's all I wanted to do was get the hell out of Canada. And my husband, in businesses and a stepson was not going to permit me to do that at the time. So really excited to share your story with everyone because the RCMP, and we have a lot of American followers on this podcast and on my channel. So I say, what would the RCMP be equivalent to? An army ranger, a police officer? No,
It's federal policing.
federal
So
policing.
for the US, it would sort of just be kind of like their FBI.
Right. Because you were on special missions, when we'll get into, which is really cool. So I feel like the public, those of us that are awake and aware and have had some kind of spiritual inclination that we're at war, are appalled and can't understand how so many officers in law enforcement are crickets, are quiet during this time, have been quiet for the past 4 years. So this is going to be really good. So let's start off with staying true to unschooling the mind. What was it for you? I mean, here you are, you're an RCMP officer. Okay, there's your life. When did you first start waking up to the craziness of the world, to the reality that isn't really what we thought it was?
Yeah. So, I mean, thank you, by the way, for having me here and just giving me a space to actually vulnerably share my story. I'm excited to do that. And my biggest hope is that, my word lands in the way it needs to land into the hearts of those that need to hear it truly. That's really a big part of my service. So to really answer your question, I was like, where did this all begin, unschooling the mind? I would have to say that for me, it really, really began shortly after the birth of my first daughter. So that was back in 2009. So I was in the RCMP for about 17 years before I left. And so in 2009, I had my first baby. And for me, that was just a really interesting journey, of course, through pregnancy and motherhood. And I think what happened that first time, I had an emergency C-section, and that kind of brought me into a little bit of an awakening of the disembodiment that women really have, first and foremost, to to the feminine, right? To our bodies. And then to add an extra layer of that, because I was doing the work that I was doing and in the way that I had to go back to work, there was this huge disconnect for, family work-life balance and even just honoring um, anything that had to do with, a return to work and what that was like for, both men and women, and mainly women. And so that's kind of when it started for me. And then after I had my second 2 years later, that's when it was just like, boom, dark night of the soul, really, really apparent just because it was a second C-section. And yeah, that's when I really started diving really deep into understanding how broken our medical system was. So it was really about what really started this was sort of like our food and medical system for me, and the unraveling I had to do with understanding how I wanted to actually raise children, right? Um, how deeply disconnected I was like from my like actual primal essence as a woman, and how there was no support, like there was just nothing in community. There was just like nothing that was able to really support women at that time coming, and again, I was far from family, it's just so much disconnect in so many different ways. So that's sort of what sparked like the unravel and the unschooling. And then it was just like 12 years of moving through all of this, and then the school systems as my kids got older, and being able to really read the patterns and the threads of sort of the what I like to call the systemic deception,
Systemic
right?
deception. So
Yeah.
you just break it down for us a little bit. The RCMP, like it to me, it still seems like it would be a masculine role in the sense of like the work. So it was that just hyper induced after childbirth, like you realized, or was there a lot of support amongst women? What is it like being a woman as an RCMP officer? We have our ideas when we drive by you and we don't want to get a ticket, but we don't really know. Like, is it, what is it like?
So, okay, I want to preface all this with, I was coming up in the RCMP between the years of like, 2005 to, about like, well, 2019, 2018 is pretty much, the years that I was really in it. And at the time that I was coming into it, there was still a very sort of, yes, I want to use the word toxic, patriarchal, masculine. I also want to say that this is not about men being bad. Like,
Mhm.
I really want to say this because I do
Thank you
not,
for saying that.
yeah,
Mhm.
100%. This is not a feminist like perspective. I think, again, that's a whole other topic I can get into with like what feminism actually did in
Mhm.
programming as a huge disservice to both men and women in many ways. Okay. But I do want to say that there was at that time like a very, very old boys club. Okay.
Mhm.
And it impeded on both men and women in different ways.
Mhm.
And so as a woman, I mean, I can give many, many examples of what was happening to me. I remember, finding out that I had just been pregnant. I had a pregnancy test, and my husband and I, who at that time was also an active duty member, and we were obviously excited, and we had been, planning this. And the first thing for me was like, how am I going to tell them? How am I going to tell them I'm pregnant? Because now I'm going to get like, booted off. I'm going to get treated differently. It's all the things. And another big piece of this was my particular and very unique experience, right? Through um, a lot of sort of like the oppression or like the harassment pieces that I experienced through my career actually came mainly from women. So this is another thing I want to bring to the table here, is the understanding that many of the women and men are wounded in two very different ways based on these, really toxic cultural standards that breed within the organization, right? So women come in a lot, and I'm speaking, like, I haven't been in this for like a good 3 years now. Okay, so I don't want to speak to the women that are there now. I am not there now, and I want to honor that. At the same time, I do know that there is still a ton of struggle, and women have had to really try to find their place, right, in a really wounded way. And it's, the whole thing about like, well, we can do it like men. Like, we're here to do it like men. And it's like, no, no, we can't. We're here to do it like women.
Mm.
And that's the part that's not seen or witnessed or accepted. And women don't know how to do it like women because we're constantly trying to do it like men.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I was very fortunate to have a ton of support from a lot of my male colleagues. And I know that there's a lot of women who have not, and who have had very different experiences. And I want to honor that too, because that is also truth. And there has been a ton of, harassment, sexual harassment, all kinds of things. And it just got way out of whack, like way out of balance. Just, it's like, so really for a woman at that time coming up and trying to have a family, it was a fight. It was a real fight and a real struggle to use my voice and not be afraid to have like punishment, literally like punitive duties or punitive, um how would I say that, like, you know sort of like this. It happens all the time where the moment you really kind of stand up for yourself, like, you're labeled, right?
Mm.
You're not one of us,
Mm.
like, you're like the
Mm-hmm.
black sheep. I'm like, okay,
It's a
it's
very
not like
tribal mindset, right?
that. Yeah, very
What
much.
would be an example of a punitive um, restriction or
Well,
something they would do if you
not
weren't
giving
falling in line?
not yeah, not giving you the courses you want, not giving you the transfer you want, not well, basically, it's just not giving you the opportunities that you have, or like giving you the runaround, like, go put it on your learning plan and then we'll discuss it later. And then 3 years later, you're still trying to get the same like course, or you're trying to get the same, or like promotions,
Mm-hmm.
not there's so many things that have transpired that are very clear, right? And everybody likes to complain about it, right? Everybody knows, we see, but again, it's like, who's actually doing, like, who's being held accountable, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And at that time, there was not a lot of people being held accountable because, everybody just kind of wants to, do their thing, get their job done, get paid,
Well, it's
get
just
the
like
overtime shifts. Like, yeah.
it's exactly what's going on today. I mean, everybody knows what's going on. Everybody sort of knows. Everybody sort of knows what's going on with politics, but everybody's like too busy just trying to be under their own, they're in their own world, under their own paycheck mind control, doing their day to day and not willing to stop and look up and take stock and do something about it. That's, I feel like, exactly where we are. So you're in this kind of, male dominated, we'll say. I love that you brought up the fact that women had to find their way in a wounded way, and in that this isn't from a feminist perspective, because we know that that's a bit of a psyop as well, and how that's all played out. So yeah, so continue. So you have your children, you realize, okay, how am I going to say? And then,
Yeah, I mean, we had our kids. We, at that time, I say my husband and I ended up getting, transferred out of one area, and then we got to Ottawa, which is a whole other can of worms for the the RCMP officers that come out of sort of like general duty and then come into this sort of like federal international policing aspect of the organization, a completely different world. And we came to Ottawa. Again, that was a whole fight to, so many things happened in that. And we get to Ottawa, and we were very responsible in the way we were trying to be very proactive and like communicate our needs to the organization. And at that time that, this was all happening, there was also something that was happening through the CBSA, where there was a couple that actually ended up going all the way to Supreme Court fighting on behalf of family status for human rights, because the CBSA was trying to do the same thing, which was like not accommodating, right, this family work-life balance. And so that sort of set the precedence and of what literally what I could use as meat to fight for what we really needed. Because at one point we were bringing our kid, like my daughter, like we were literally like handing my daughter off in briefings, and like we were paying for 3 different daycares. We were paying for, like, it was insane the amount of things that we were kind of forced into having to do just to find a way to care for our kids.
Mm-hmm.
It was really hard, especially with the shift work. And and again, I just also want to say, like, I can hear it like in the background. I just love all those people that would say, well, you're a police officer, you should know. You should know that you're going to get into this, and you should know what it's going to be like. And it's like, you know what? Until you have kids, because there's so many people that just like to judge, right? And that's fine. And it's like, go ahead and judge, but yeah, until you really go through it. And it's the same with the mental health aspect, that culture. Like, until you really go through it and you understand that there is zero support and that you literally have to warrior your way through this, right? And again, all for divine purpose. But yeah, so that's where we were at. We were fighting a lot, and basically ended up where my husband finally got a transfer to a different unit, and then I remained at one unit, and we did our best to kind of make it work, but not at the cost, not without not going without like a cost to our actual mental health, like really bad. So
well, you're there's 2 of you in that, right? So what they predominantly would have been used to men being in that role, women being at home with the kids prior to. So this is like a whole new thing in the last, let's say, 40 years. I don't even know how long women have been really active in the RCMP. I can't say, you might know better than me, but this is a new thing. So to support like the family, to be having children and be in this career is obviously was a difficult thing. So you were kind of awake and aware before 2020. You were already having issues. And were you already labeled, do you feel, a little bit of an outsider, a black sheep within?
for sure.
Yeah.
It's like,
You were already.
I own it pretty well. Like, I was
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, I mean, you see, that experience really set the foundation for me understanding the disconnect, right? So what then ended up happening was, as I started even trying to search for resources for mental health, and I could see how broken the medical system was. I could see how broken the like actual RCMP, the organization at that time, had zero resources to give us. And like, it's like, again, you're just like a check in the box, to basically cover their butts to make sure, like, and again, that's a whole other unravel that I can get into. But having moved through all that, and then of course, listen, and I'm not going to lie, like, you got mom and dad with severe PTSD. What do you think that is doing to our children as well? Right? What do you, like, that is being transferred on to the kids, right? In many ways. So as we started trying to figure out how to heal ourselves and how to like find holistic methods on how to heal ourselves, the impact that also had on our children would show up through school. And then it was like, oh, wait a minute, guess what? The schools aren't set up to provide support for children that they're trying to diagnose with ADHD and dyslexia. At like my oldest, my little one was doing fine. My oldest had huge difficulty moving through a lot of the system. She was being told she'll never be able to, read or write properly. So then we became like Joan of Arc parents trying to find, support outside of the public system it was crazy. We were paying like almost $2,000 a month out of pocket for 3 hours a week of remedial services that there was only like 2 people in Canada that had this one particular skill set that we could find for my daughter. It was insane. It was insane. So it was like 10 years of really like unschooling, unraveling my core belief systems, my understanding of the world, my understanding of, outside systems, right? And living, like it's the lived experience of that. Like I could tell you till you're blue in the face that it's broken and oh yeah, it's broken. But until it really affects your life and you really understand the magnitude, right? And yeah, so that's what really set the foundation, right? And then from there, it got to like my last couple of years in the organization where I was just like really good at seeing the patterns, really good at seeing the bullshit. And I was like, wow, okay, corruption, like lies, illusion, right? And the lingo, it's like the government lingo, it all has the same little lingo that we like to play. And I was like, no, that for me ended up being almost like the second round on the spiral of my, second dark night of the soul, where I was just like, wow, okay, here's another identity I have to unravel. And it's like my entire career, I'm getting sick because I'm so out of alignment with my moral compass in seeing and understanding what is actually going on. Right. So yes, when 2020 came, I was like, I know exactly what's happening. Just like,
Wow.
right.
Wow.
So yeah.
So you
Yeah.
were like a pattern recognitionist is the word that I like to use instead of a conspiracy theorist, because that's basically, I feel the same with my unraveling is just realizing that I could all of a sudden see these patterns, right?
Yeah.
And I had a similar kind of leading up to 2020, which was working in social work and working with families who had children with disabilities and seeing the families who disclosed to me that they felt that their children were harmed by the vaccine, being gaslit by the medical system and the power that the medical system had, and that I didn't want to work for them when I was asked to work for the children's hospitals. It just seemed like this huge bureaucratic entity that just, it was, yeah, fascinating. So when you say PTSD, let's just roll back again. You mean PTSD from things that you saw on the job and you wouldn't get the support that you needed, and then it
Yeah.
would affect your kids, and then you're realizing this cat gets kicked down the road here, and no one really, there's no supports in that way.
Yeah. I mean, for me, yeah, totally. The beginning of my career, there were many, many times where, we encountered whatever it is, critical incident or like, minor incidents, whatever that is that um sort of like disrupted and disconnected me, right? There were a ton of times where there was not even a debrief.
Mm,
Right?
mhm.
There was a ton of times where like your manager, your supervisor, like especially when you're young in service and you're like full of piss and vinegar and you're just like, yeah, I want to,
Yeah, I get it, yeah.
and you don't like they don't at that time they weren't teaching you about the importance of that self-care, self-preservation,
Mm,
of like reaching out, like that, because again, at that time, the culture for mental health was very much about like, you just don't talk about it,
mhm,
put your big
mhm,
boy pants on and get back out there. That's
mhm,
what's happening. And again, that has changed in different ways. And I have watched it change in different ways. There is an effort now, but again, the effort is very systemic.
mhm,
It's still very systemic.
mhm,
And a lot of people don't understand that because they're like, oh, good, we've got a lifeline and that's enough. And so this is where, the other aspect of healing through all of that is so important, is that especially as service work, like those of us that are in first response, not just police officers, but we tend to, really not love ourselves because we
Mm,
are constantly putting ourselves, before, like we're putting everybody else before ourselves, right? Because that's the job. It's like,
mhm,
go, save, fix, right? And we're, a lot of us, especially in the RCMP, are so used to like getting the shit end of the stick in terms of like equipment, in terms of, resources. So it's sort of like, whatever, right? The moment you see anything, it's like, oh, that's shiny. I got to go for it. That's great. I'll take it. You know what I
mhm,
mean?
mhm,
So the the sort of when I was like really, really coming up through it, there was nothing. There was really nothing. And it's there's a whole illusion aspect to this as well. They developed a beautiful, like the intention is always good, because I do want to say that there are very well intended human beings in these organizations. Okay. Otherwise, most of us would not find ourselves in that kind of work. So I do want to
mhm,
say that there are absolutely beautiful human beings that truly want to help
mhm.
and make a difference. Okay. And unfortunately, it's, it, you know, it has to come down to like unraveling your own wounding, right? First, before you can actually go out there and truly, with deep integrity, support something, that is more full spectrum versus, simply just cognitive, simply just, like, and psychology has its place, and that's beautiful, but that's kind of just become the norm without looking at all the other aspects of what actually disconnects you,
Well,
what is.
they can't do that because it would break down and expose the entire system. So
And there you
basically, you're saying like every other system, there's great people, there's some really great, well-intended people in there. But is it not like every other system, like the medical system, the government? I mean, the people at the top, it's structured and on a need to know basis. Am I
oh yeah,
correct? So
oh yeah,
everything is compartmentalized, and you are trained just like we are in school and under the authoritarian model. Yeah, even if parenting is to do what you're told, follow in line, don't speak to your partner, don't question
right,
authority, right? The same thing. And that's why everybody's running around wounded because and disconnected to source because they've been brought up in this kind of like, as you said, systemic
yeah,
deception.
totally,
So, and so you're talking to people that don't even know that they're in it, right? It's like that Plato's
right,
idea about being in the cave, right? And you're saying the sun shines out here, and they're like, you're crazy, right?
yeah.
It's the same thing, but there are people at the very top who understand very well how the system is intended to run and
Oh,
are
absolutely.
making massive moves on a global scale to herd the human farm, so to speak. Are you in agreement with that?
I am in complete agreement with that. I
Yeah.
am totally, totally in agreement with that. Yeah,
So
yeah.
so now you're into 2020. You're already primed for understanding that you're in this system, and the fake big lie con happens. And your husband, is he with you all the way? Are you guys completely on the same page and have been all these years?
You know, no, I'm not gonna
Never,
lie.
it's never that easy.
It's never that easy. He was always willing to remain open and curious, right? And he had his own very deep like trauma that, and also like ancestral stuff through like family of origin, like all of these things, like this programming that he also had to really unravel in order to get to a place where he could even receive, right? So it was, and I don't want to say that it was a battle, although there were some pretty heated conversations, but I think for him it was witnessing my journey and the sort of things of like, you just can't make this shit up.
Mhm,
Right. And
mhm,
then confirmations that he was then receiving through, let's say, other individuals or colleagues that may have worked for other security forces, you know, especially through like the convoy and all of these things, right? Where he was meeting with people that were, you know, in high up places that were obviously awake, not woke, but awake to a lot of this deception and had their own experiences that really paralleled a lot of mine.
Okay.
So for him, he was like, okay, yeah.
She's not crazy.
Yeah, I'm not crazy, right? So, and that's what was happening. And it was really hard for him because most of his, you know, what I really want to give him a lot of respect for is like, so I let like 2020, like right, when was I? Literally February of 2020, I had come back from West Africa. I was on a deployment there. I came back and then I took a bit of time off and I was in Miami literally for my birthday. Okay. And like I was in Miami in March of 2020 and I get a text like, they're shutting down all the borders or everything's shutting down. Like, what's going on? I was like, oh, I know. Okay. Got it. Right. So I left after that. I was like, I'm not going back. I can't, this is like too much. I had
So
already
you
told,
knew immediately that
oh
this
yeah,
was a psyop?
oh God, I was talking about this to some of my colleagues in the special forces in West Africa, and we were like kind of just going back and forth on some things and having some really good aha moments, and you know, and I was the one literally saying, and I was literally telling everybody, watch, they're going to have a vaccine for this. They're going to have something for this. And they're going to try to force it on everybody. And everybody was making fun of me and laughing. And, you know, like I was known as like the witch because I, you know, would show up with my tinctures and tonics and everything. It was like, you know, all that kind of stuff. And it was fun. It was nothing like bad at all. You know, it was like, I owned it. It's great.
Yeah.
Um, but I called it, like I literally called it. And because I, you know, and it's not to say that I didn't get like my yellow fever vaccine because I had to go to, you know, West Africa and all the things for work. But you know, even in 2009, when I had that first pregnancy and that whole H1N1 thing was happening, for me, it was a visceral no. Like I'm not doing this as a pregnant woman. Every time, you know, I would example like yellow fever vaccine, I knew I would go see my naturopathic doctor and she would like give me a whole supply of like, you know, glutathione and things to like support my liver to kind of like flush and help my system kind of flush it. So I was trying to be as conscious as possible with certain things. But when this jab came out, again, this was an even deeper, like, this is,
You
you
knew
know,
something was up.
I knew something was up. And, you know, again, just like most people that went through that, you know, my husband, for one thing, was, as I think everybody knows that in the RCMP, they also came down with the mandates before the mandates were official. So my husband went through a ton of harassment, okay, because
Wow.
he was in his know. He's like, they haven't forced it on us yet. They haven't come down with the official mandates yet. But he and another group, like he had about, you know, maybe 10, 15 individuals just in his units that were like, I don't want this. Like, I don't want to do this. Right. And they were getting, well, I won't speak for all the others, but I can speak that my husband was getting really harassed and being called out, and punitive duties being put on, very sort of, like, so his job, he was in protection, right? He was in protection work. So he was doing the VIP and the, not the prime minister detail, but he was doing the detail for the governor general.
Mm.
And so he was very privy to all of the like backdoor behind the scenes, like, you know, the mask stuff and all that. And he was just like, this is like there was a lot of situations that he was coming into where it was like, wow, this is really for television. Like, this is
Wow.
really for media. And then what ended up happening was, even before the actual mandate was official, you know, he literally got called out in the middle of the office for not being vaccinated when he questioned why they wanted to give him a duty to literally be separate from the rest of like the team and the VIP that they were due to escort. He's like, I want to know why. Why are you guys, why are you putting me on this detail that I'm just like standing by myself, or I have to patrol in my uniform now around Rideau Hall or whatever, like in Ottawa, which is usually like a duty that's given to our what we call the sorry, I'm looking for the word, I haven't been in a while, but it's the retired members that come back and they do some like contract work for us,
Okay.
for RCMP, and he was being given those duties back in uniform. And again, the mandates weren't even like official. So there was a lot of things transpiring, and the fear, because it's like already you have a culture, right, that is telling you, shut up. Like you don't like, right? And now it's getting, compounded with the next fear of like, you're going to lose your job. You're going to get sent home with no pay indefinitely, right? And then you're going to be labeled a conspiracy theorist in a federal police force, right? So there's, again, layers. So it's just to give you an idea of like what was actually happening. And so, I'm already removed for this and I'm watching him go through it. And in the conflict and the like actual trauma that was actually like happening to him, and his going back and forth is like, okay, well, shit, if you're leaving, you're exiting, right? I'm the one with the one salary. We have to feed our family. Like we live in Ottawa, we have a mortgage to pay. We have kids to like the whole thing. So he was really like he was in it. And I just had to, what was really hard for me was like, because I'm all fire and I'm like, you're not doing this, you can't do this, you're gonna like, and then I had to really remove myself and let him find his way. And that was his soul journey. And that was like a big part of his deeper awakening. And when he did, then we kind of got on the same page.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah.
So he left. He did not succumb to the pressure. And after you and I spoke the first time, we realized we knew a few Danny Bulfer, we knew a few of the same. How many people in the RCMP actually do you think were that strong and didn't succumb to the pressure? Like how many? Like I never hear of an RCMP group like for example, Kristen Nagel's, frontline nurses, seemed like there was quite a few, right? Like how many RCMP?
I feel like there was a lot, but that we don't know of. So we do have, there are one or two organizations that were actually a big part of, like even supporting the convoy, right? There's a lot of people that, and I'm going to say, like, to be fully transparent here, there was a lot of people dealing with such hardcore mental health issues as a result of this, that the one really good thing at that time with the RCMP that we had as a benefit was to literally go off duty sick, right? So if you go off duty sick, right, you get paid.
Right, right.
Paid. So with full truth, these people were dealing with really heavy mental health issues. And so they went off duty sick while this is all happening, hoping to heal and wait out, right, this process. And so yeah, that was what was happening a lot. So I know that just in our kind of neck of the woods in Ottawa, there were a lot. There were many who like right down to the last day, like we're fighting down to the last day. And, again, really forced into this sort of, and again, zero judgment, because it's one thing to be in camp, like do your part and like have the whole like veil in front of you, right? But it's another thing for these other people who really, really felt like they were going to lose everything. And I do have compassion. Like I do have a lot of compassion. And I think for me personally and my husband personally, the only reason why we were really able to be like, F off, no, is because of the amount of unravel and shit that we went through for years prior to find our authentic truth and our sovereignty and our deepest sacred no,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so
Mm-hmm.
that, thank God, I
All that
went through that.
happened.
Yeah, yeah.
So we were also talking. So then you guys decided, okay, we're getting out of here. And you moved to Costa Rica. You took the kids, you left, you pulled them out of school, you got out of all the systems,
Yeah.
right? And was that
Yes.
like the best day of your life? Ah,
It was extremely difficult. So it was difficult and it wasn't. So I had this intuition and this knowing, and I had been wanting to also leave Canada for a while. Um, just because, again, like, just wasn't in alignment with the way I wanted to raise my kids. And like I could see all the tech coming up and all the schools, and like all of, the transhumanism thing wasn't as, aggressive, prior to like 2019. But I could see the disembodiment movement, right?
mhm,
I could see the pattern of disembodiment through everything that I had gone through and through witnessing and all of the things. So yes, pattern recognition, 100%. Um, so I had wanted to leave for a while. And when all of that happened, and I mean, I just also want to say, we had just built our dream house.
mm,
Like, we had a beautiful home on the river. I was already starting my deeper service work to humanity. I had, like, really left all the things behind and done a ton of healing over 10 years. And I was now supporting others to, find truth and like being of service to truth in many ways. And it was just like, we had never been to Costa Rica, but we had some people, right, that we knew also in the RCMP who had done these like mic drop, like, I'm not, like, walked into the office, I'm not getting vaccinated, F you, I'm done, and left the country, right? So
mhm,
now, am I saying that's healthy? No, but I am saying that that is what they did, right?
mhm,
And so me reaching out to them and understanding, okay, so there's a big expat community, there's this thing, cool, cool, cool. And just knowing that I wanted to give my children, that was my why. My biggest why was, I'm not running away from something, I'm running to something. And I didn't know what that something was. It was very unknown. I had never visited Costa Rica before, but I just had this trust. And
mhm,
I was like, let's give these kids an adventure that will help them to safeguard their innocence,
mm.
which is this innocence that gets so distorted through the systems. That
Amen.
is what I wanted to, after so much conflict through, just like the school conflict that I had dealt with just with my oldest. And again, not to say that these are bad teachers. It's just, again, you know, they're not set up for a holistic approach. And that is the biggest deception of all, is that there's no spirit in system. There's no source in
Mm.
system, right? There's
Well said.
extraction only. It's extraction. We're extracting your life force.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that is well said. Very true, right? I mean, sure, there's some great, I hear that all the time. Well, I like my principal, and oh, she's got a good teacher this year, and I haven't seen those books yet in my library. And it's like, okay, guys, you got to understand here. This is a huge, you got to have a bird's eye view, right? And not just be looking at your direct experience necessarily, because it is insidious, some of the things that are going on. So you realize that, you say, I'm going to give your kids an adventure. How beautiful. Like, what a blessing, really. Right. I often say COVID was a blessing for so many reasons now, looking back, even though it was hard. Usually is. That's how life goes. So you moved down to Costa Rica. Tell us what you know, the top three things are, and the top three things you didn't expect and that aren't so great. Because I know a lot of people that have moved back
Oh,
already,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
totally. Totally. Yeah. I mean, so, and I just love, so, before I answer that particular question, it's that, we, I really want people to understand that this was a very, very calculated decision. Like, there was a lot of going back and forth, there was a lot of like of figuring out how are we going to do the financial thing. Like, so long story short, we ended up having to sell everything, sold our home. Thank God we got in right at a good time where we made very good money on our home and, basically cashed out our pensions, which is like unheard of in the culture of the RCMP. Oh my God, don't cash it out. You're going to get like, killed on taxes, which you do. And we knew that. And yeah, so we did all of that and lost a lot of friendships, lost a lot of, I should say, family, went through a lot of hardship with that. That was really difficult. It was really, really difficult. Nobody could really understand, like, we're crazy. We're conspiracy theorists. What is wrong with you? Like, I mean, everything, I got the blame for so many things. I'm like, cool, good. This is part of my journey. It's part of my expression, my expansion. Great. We get to Costa Rica. And the plan was to expand my particular service work and my particular business, and also buy some land and build something that was simple and that we could also host what I like to call, I don't call it retreats, I call it returns. We return, we don't retreat. So basically, that was the plan. And well, I mean, I can get into multi-layers of this, but when you come to a place, especially where it is the energetic of jungle, the jungle and the land holds a very, very specific presence that it wants you to also hold. So everything is extremely slow here. There is almost like a ferocious regenerative energy. So it's like, if you come here and you haven't done your inner work, good luck. Good luck, because it will rip you another. Okay. So it will literally. And so, we come here and everything is really in our face. So it's difficult. We're still doing the work. Our kids are now in this beautiful, it's called Life Project Education. And it's a community-based sort of like private school, but fully holistic, really supports the full development of the child. So like the spiritual, emotional, psychological, the whole thing, the whole being of the child. Again, small classes. I mean, my daughter, I do want to say that it's like both my daughters, like many children coming out of that whole, thing with 2020, 2021, had a ton of traumatic experiences with the whole online thing. And like, especially my oldest, like she was in fetal position, crawled up in a corner, literally, I can't do this. I'm not, like, it was horrendous. It was horrendous. Being told she couldn't read and she'd never learn how to write, right? Being told she needed medication, being told all the things. 6 months in this area at that community, beautiful school, holistic, holding and nurturing the child. She's reading novels now. Behavior is always going to be behavior because I've got a tween and a teen. Okay. So I'm not going to lie. It's not easy, but that is what I came here. So if anything, she can now, both my children can now, walk through life knowing that they're effing capable.
Yeah.
They're capable. Right. Yeah. So yeah, so there was a lot of this.
So basically the best thing you ever did was pulling them out of the school system for that certain amount of time, the Canadian, North American.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Giving them an opportunity to get to know themselves beyond what they're being told. Right. And that's the thing, is like, towards the end, I was arguing about, like, I was going back to the school with things like, what do you mean you can't, like, so my kids don't have tech. Like, we have tech in the house. Like, yes, they're allotted, they're allowed 30 minutes a day to like check in with friends and family and all the things, so long as, they've done their chores and they're reading and all the things that they need to do. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is, it was really hard being a holistically minded, consciously aware parent with children going to a school that was like, systemic in that way, where everybody else has cell phones, everybody else is on TikTok, everybody. And so it's like the arguments that would happen was like, why can't I do that? Why can't I, why do we eat this way? And why do they eat that way? And it's like, where is the community? Right. And so this is what we were able to also find. Not that it doesn't come without its challenges here either,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like a whole heck ton less.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's like, oh, wait a minute. There is another way
Mm-hmm.
that is not this program. Right.
Well, and
So
that's basically what unschooling is, right? Like giving children the unrestricted time to unhook from a system if they've been in the system or not
yeah,
know the system and actually just connect with your children and allow their own path, their inner compass, their inner path to unfold through their interests and passions. But we can't do that when we are ramming down programs 6, 7 hours a day by other systems. Right. I mean,
no.
when you do this, and you've been out for 4 years, I've been out for 4 years, you look back and go, I can't believe, like, like that. Thank God, my kids are going to be okay now, but that this is the system we've set up. This is what we were raised in. This is how, I mean, we're literally all program junkies,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
from one program to another. So, okay. So are your intentions to move back?
So here we are,
Here we are.
almost 2 years later. And, again, this was always a stepping stone. Like that was always certain. It was like, this is going to be a stepping stone. We're going to go, we did buy property. It, has taken forever to get permits and all the things. And I've had to really sit with and question, okay, what's going on here? Like, what's the deeper truth? What's the deeper message? There's a lot of parts of me that have also, again, deeply, deeply healed and deeply integrated those shadow aspects. And I've done, even more work, which has been so supported by the energetics and the land here. You know, I think if anything, Costa Rica does provide that for many people who are sort of on that spiritual path. Okay. Now it doesn't come without, the shadow in that as well. And there is a lot of bypassing, which makes me furious. And I can, that's a whole other podcast that I can
Yeah.
get into about like the spiritual bypass and like the communities and all, oh,
Yes,
right. So
yes,
that's just,
yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's something that I'm just like, yeah. But
Mhm.
for me, just recently, and I travel quite a bit because I do a lot of work. Like I bring people on deep pilgrimage to different lands and all the things. And I just miss the seasons. Like there was this. It started with me being like, ooh, wow, the sun is this extremely ferocious, penetrative force here all the time. And I'm just like, okay, I need a little bit more balance. I love my seasons. My kids are very, very close with my sister and my brother-in-law and their cousins, and they miss them very much. My mom has come up here twice now and spent like 2, 3 months at a time to be with us and be with her grandchildren. So even though, the RCMP, my husband and I, because we were in the RCMP, we were never home, right? Because we were always living in a different province or whatever, and so we're like, we can do it. And we have, but guess what? We don't have to anymore. We
Mhm.
don't have to. And this is sort of like this next part of this expansion that I'm going through where it's like, man, I just spent 12, 13 years in deep healing through like severe PTSD and like massive spiritual awakenings and all of these things that required, a depth of discomfort and suffering, right? And now I'm like, guess what? Yeah. And I don't have to do it that way anymore.
Mhm.
I don't have to suffer through it anymore.
Mm.
And so as I unraveled the matrix within, right? it's then on the outside to be like, listen, it doesn't matter where I go. It doesn't matter, where I live. So long as I can be in deep, authentic truth with myself and express from that place and embody from that place, right? That is service just in itself. My children see that. My husband sees that. That hits a frequency that then magnetizes that frequency to you in a different way, So so we are exploring the option of potentially going back and building a tiny little cottage, uh, somewhere in the woods, because, I definitely would want to be more in the woods and not necessarily in like suburbia and stuff. But again, it feels like a stepping stone to potentially something else. Like my heart is truly in the Mediterranean, and that is where I would love to be able to bring my kids one day. And my husband loves it too, so we'll see.
So unraveling the matrix within, it's so true. I often say, like, that's why unschooling our kids, the account that I made, which kind of blew up over time, really changed into unschooling the mind. Because what I realized over time is that once you pull the kids out, the kids will be fine. It's really the parents that are most conditioned. It's us that have all the programming. It's us that has to deal with like the deep wounds and the systemic deception and all the things that you're mentioning. And so if we can unschool our own minds first, our kids will benefit from that. If we can, like you said, come from that place of deep authenticity within our own selves, we'll magnetize that. That is the work. That's all we have to do. We don't have to do this huge, amount of things, right? It can be overwhelming. We just have to go on the inside, which we are literally not, encouraged to do in these systems. Um,
No.
so I'm going to give you the last word for what, because we're going to wrap it up and then I've got a few community questions in our Q&A portion of this. So we'll end with the podcast here, but maybe let people know where they can reach out to you, because now you're taking all of the things that you've done and, like I say, turning your mess right into a message to serve others. So what are you up to now and where can people find you?
Yeah, I mean, so my website is www.intemana.ca. So you can find me there and more information about the work I do there. And yeah, my Instagram as well is at it's Priestess of the Blue Fire. And yeah, I've just developed, over the years, and I'm always evolving. So that is one thing I do want to say, is that there's no absolute. I'm always evolving. I have come to realize just how starved our society is of wisdom,
Mm,
and wisdom that comes through real lived experience.
mhm,
Okay. And integrated lived experience, right? We can live through all of the experience, but if we don't integrate it and if we don't live from that place, then it's still disembodied.
mhm,
And so my whole service is really about, you know, consistently evolving through my own understanding and awareness of truth, not Sylvie's truth, because that's egoic, but truth. What is that? Right? What is truth? And where do we live from that place? And it does require pattern recognition, like energetic modalities, ancestral healing, inner child healing. It requires a psycho-spiritual approach,
mhm,
right? So I've been, again, apprenticing and training and certifying and doing all of these things that now I'm like, no, I'm enough. I am enough.
mhm,
And this is who I'm here to be. And if this resonates with you and that you are in search of learning how to find your truth, I reflect that to you. I become a mirror. We do shadow work. It is confronting uncomfortable work. This
mm,
isn't therapizing. This isn't,
mhm,
and again, I went through 13 years of psychotherapy. I went through many psychologists before I could find the one that was really truly in resonance with a holistic approach. And then that helped expand me into the next phase. And so a big part of the work I do, like you'll hear the word priestess, you'll hear the word shaman, and all of these things, which again are, becoming more and more sort of like mainstream and marketed. But my job is to steward the sacred. Like my job is to really, I always say I'm a carrier of the mysteries, right? I'm a carrier of really having lived through the unknown and being able to come out onto the other side through the underworld, right? And be here in the flesh and say, hey, I can illuminate that path for you. I can support your journey through that. So I do a lot of different things, right? Many different modalities that we use to get there. But essentially, for those who may not know much about priestessing or shamanism, it is coaching. It is a form of coaching. It is a form of soul mapping, right? Really, because we cannot, like, if you are here in 2024 and you have lived through the last 4 years, and like, again, I'm not here to try to, how would you say? I'm looking for the word. I don't usually look for my words, but I'm looking for my word right now. But I'm not trying to sell you on spirit. I'm not trying to sell you on source. Like that's your journey, right? But there's many people right now who were sort of in that middle camp, and they're just like, holy shit, now I'm getting it. Like what is happening, and it's like, I'm not here for the people who can't see. I'm
Yeah,
here
yeah.
when they're able and they're willing, I'll be here.
Right,
Right.
right. Yeah. Well, I would have appreciated having somebody walk me through my dark nights of the soul. Man, oh man, A lot of
Yeah.
us have to walk it alone, but to have somebody who's gone the distance, who's been in that kind of systemic deceptive environment that you've talked about, and come through the other side back to spirit, a return to spirit and self. I mean, is amazing. I can completely see why you're in this field and why I mean, I feel like all of our mess is turning into our message for those of us who hear the calling since 2020 and before, because I certainly had many awakenings before, but it didn't all come together. I mean, it's still unfolding, but it's like 2020 was the catalyst. It was like the gong. It was like the call was there, the red
Yeah.
Batmobile phone, are you going to answer it? Right? Are you going to answer it? And so some of us are doing things like I am literally doing the opposite of what I was trained to do in university all those years, trying to teach kids how to, with disabilities, teach the families cognitive behavioral therapy. And now I'm unschooling where I'm like, find their spirit, find their path, right? So you're very much doing the same. And thank goodness for that, because I feel like you are the lighthouse and you are one of the leaders of the new earth. You are a pioneer of the new earth. And this is what you've come to do. And no one can resonate or respect literally or follow you unless they know, oh wow, you walked through those coals on your own. You did those dark nights of the soul, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's wonderful for you to share your story. So, thank you very much for joining us. I will have all of Sylvie's notes in the show notes of how you can find her on intimana.ca and Priestess of the Blue Fire. So, I'll have that there for you all. And we're going to continue on with our Q&A in our private community, because there are some things that I want to touch on that I don't think that we can talk about necessarily when it comes to the trafficking and the RCMP, and some of the juicy stuff I'm going to hold for public. And so if you're interested in that, take a look at our private community where we continue on the conversation. So thank you so much, Sylvia.
Tasha,
We'll
thank
check
you.
in.
This is just, it was, a real blessing. And thank you for just giving me opportunity to use my voice. And yeah, just really happy to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you again.
Okay.
Okay. That's good. Before I used to pause it, and then I accidentally on a guest, Dr. Laura Braden, forgot to restart it. Like we had a problem 10 minutes in and I pressed pause, and then anyway, and so we had this amazing podcast. She was crying at the end and I lost it all. So I don't even touch anything now. So I'm
Yeah.
just like, my editor will edit it out. So I'm like, okay, just hold on for one one second. No, that was great. A great introduction into your story and then the work that you do. I'm sorry that I have to cut it off, but if I do podcasts too long, no one listens, right? So then it's
Yeah.
like it's futile.
Yeah.
But I know the ladies jumped off, but we've definitely talked about you in our community calls because I had brought up one of the things that we talked about, and I wanted you to tell your story about. I think it was me that said to you, like, Sylvia, is it true that like this are my suspicions correct with the CSIS guys that were undercover talking about the child sex trafficking? Like, because there's some days that I'm like, I was so in that hole, in
Yeah.
that, you know, and I mean, I was like, and I was so by myself. I was like cuddling with my kids at night, like just crying. I remember being in the shower once um, crying just at night when the kids would go to bed. I remember having psychic attacks. I remember being in the closet because my husband was like, "That's enough. I don't want to hear about this." And I remember going down to get some meat out of the freezer, and I couldn't go back up because I had this little kid's face in my this video I'd seen in my mind and I couldn't get it out and I was just like hyperventilating. I was calling my one friend. I had one friend. Everybody needs somebody that was also going down this. And I was like, I just can't get it, and she's like, you're just going to take a breath. You're going to go up there and you're going to like, that's how crazy it was for me. So some days I'm like, I still feel in my soul like that's what this is all about. Like this is all about the kids. This is all about this huge trafficking ring that all of our leadership and these ancient ruling families have been a part of. And the entire thing's aside, everything's a psyop. This is what the real thing is this thing. And
Yeah.
when we all understand what it is, we will all come together
Yeah.
because we will
Yeah.
be so broken that we will be brought to our knees. The truth will bring us to our knees in a space where we'll actually break open our hearts and our souls. I feel like it's like a human race. Is this
Yeah.
true though? Because then I'm like, am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy. And I've had, my own very unique and particular experiences of this and yes, West Africa for me and the deployments that I did there really served as a catalyst to a very ancient and deeper knowing within me. I mean, I can go like 2, 3 hours in the unravel of, what I didn't know then as like I didn't have the neural pathway connection. I only had sort of like the deeper sense of like, that's not, and then it's like now I have both the cognitive awareness of like, oh, okay, I get it. That's what's happening. And that's why I feel this way. Right.
Mm,
So, um, and it goes deeper than that. It goes to a lot of the understanding of, my actual soul mapping and like my astrology and what I'm here and like the lives I've lived and like the understanding of all of this. People like to kind of label woo, right? But that is such a vital part to the mystery. And that this is, and this is where this is also a really big piece is like we have been programmed to believe that the mystery doesn't exist.
mm,
The mystery is the essence of the feminine. This is the feminine essence and energetic, right? This is the feminine, this is the void, this is the unseen, the unknown. There's all of this, right? And if we go back, like, and I do a lot of this, the work that I do on pilgrimages is to really get people to understand their history, through the Egyptian lineages and understanding like when the templates turned in Egypt and why, and understanding what Egypt actually is and what those lands actually are, and like what is Sardinia and why, what are these temples? What are these sacred sites? Like that is such a vital part of the understanding of what is happening and why
mhm,
that you're
mm,
speaking to, right?
mhm,
So when, like, I mean, we literally have like almost 4,000 years to unravel and catch up on, right? And so we can go down all these rabbit holes, which are, what they are sometimes. And it's not until we start really connecting those dots that we then really start to understand, oh shit, okay, yes, we are not alone. Like, yeah, we are Gaian, we had, there are other things out there beyond Earth. This is not only, I mean, and again, it's not to get caught in the trap of, look this way, the aliens are here while we're
Yes.
doing this,
Yes, yes, yes. That's a big one.
right?
Coming
So,
soon to a screen near us, right?
right. I mean, it's always been here. It's
Hmm.
always been this
Hmm.
way. We need to, there are mass discoveries happening right now, as we speak, like even just yesterday, Robert Edward Grant, just love this guy. He is amazing, such an amazing genius of our time that is literally unraveling a lot of the coding in the Egyptian pyramids, right? In the
Mm.
Great Pyramids that literally speak to, right? Like a lot of what is happening. And so right now, all of this sort of like movement into this, next age, we want to call it the Aquarian age, and we're coming out of like a dogmatic Piscean age, and we're coming into, this whole new wave of like innovation, right? We have to be careful with that again, because
Totally.
humans have not evolved yet. Like in our wounding, we're still so much in our wounding and unintegrated that we can't act from a place of union in order to evolve enough to utilize proper technological advances in a way
Hmm.
that will benefit us.
Hmm.
Right. But we're coming into that age now where it's like we can't ignore that all of this is happening, and like the systemic shit is trying to again use this now as a program of enslavement in many ways.
Hmm.
So yes, the children have been at the heart, the innocence, it is the essence of divine innocence.
Hmm.
It is our wounded inner children, right? Like, so long as it's like there's so many things, there's so many aspects of this that I can get into, but yeah, 100%. It is
So
this
okay, obviously this is a spiritual war.
100%.
So when you share with our community when I think you were in West Africa and the sun was on you and you felt
Oh
like,
yeah.
tell me that again. So I'll botch it if you don't.
No, no. Yeah. So just to remember that I had already been on a very shamanic path. Okay. So I
Hmm.
was already very much in touch with those aspects of myself. I had already been studying quite a bit and learning and embodying and utilizing a lot of the ancient Egyptian mysteries through my own, in my own way, in my own life, in my own service. And so here I am in West Africa, and I'm in the middle of the desert. I was in Mali somewhere, and yeah, I was on a, where was I? I think I was in the French, I was on a French military base out in the desert. And yeah, there was a bunch of other things that were happening, and there was like questions, and it was kind of like chaotic, and people didn't know, like, what are we going to today, and like who are we meeting today, and like I was doing a lot of source development, and like I have to give a little context to like what I was actually doing there. So I worked undercover for many years, and I got lent to our Canadian Special Forces while in West Africa to work on a project in particular, which was a whole other sham that we found out about later on. Like, we weren't actually there for that, even though we were made to believe we were there for that, and all the money that was being invested in this sort of like, excuse my language, cockamamie investigation, like whatever.
And it
Yeah,
was
and there
about
was a
one
lot.
particular person that went missing, right? What was her name
Yeah,
again?
exactly. It was, and again, and not to say that this was cockamamie because the person went missing,
Right,
not
but
to say
they're using it as a
it
front,
was,
like everything.
yeah, exactly. So, long story short, there was always some form of like little like chaos and like rescheduling and this, and nobody knew, like it was just like flying off the seat of our pants sometimes. So here I am one morning, I'm like, you know, literally the only woman in this particular part of this, special forces French military base. And I'm getting ready to, go and do the briefing that morning. And I literally take off my, like, I was like all in my like gear and my stuff and like my clothes or whatever. I take off my shoes. Okay. And I really want to like get my feet in the sand, just
Yeah.
like in the middle of this, right? And I'm like, whatever. So I take off my shoes, get my feet in the sand, and it's like this red sand. And like, when we talk about spirit and our chakras and all the things, like this is the red ray. Like, Africa really holds a lot of the root of humanity, the red ray that comes in. Like we can talk about that on a whole other thing, but wanted to get my feet in the sand. And I get my feet in the sand, I get my feet in the earth, and I look up, right? Because the sun was so just strong and I could feel the ray. And for me, this was like, oh my God, this is Ra, Ra. Like if we know about Egyptian, mythology and understanding Ra as like the solar logos, the solar force. And the moment I was like, oof, like this is Raw, and I got the goosebumps, and I just had this wave of vision come over me. Like it was literally like I could see that I was like standing on top of, like, not necessarily immediately on top, but that my feet were rooting into a graveyard of dead children,
Mm, yeah.
right? and and I was like, wow, I'm and again, I'm still at a point where yes, I'm doing the work and I'm unraveling identity, and you still get the ego that's like, come on. Like, you hear the little voice like, come on, like what, and I'm like, oh
Yeah.
shit, it's
Yeah.
like, right.
Right. Yeah.
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 So that was one of the
That was
visions.
confirmation for you
I was
on a
really
deeper
comfortable.
knowing. And so
Yeah.
when I met some of these undercover CSIS guys and at the convoy, and we were in the war room, and I don't know if you remember, but every Saturday it was like -25 and this huge wind would blow in, and so I'd walk in there and I'd say, oh yeah, weather warfare. And this was at a time where people weren't talking about it that much yet. We were just dealing with COVID. And all the guys looked at me and went, yeah. I said, oh, DARPA and HARP, now people kind of know about it, but and they were like, yeah, she knows. And I was like, and I realized it was the first time somebody actually acknowledged what I said, because I'd been used to, like, my husband and the other people around me thinking I'm nuts for the last few years until we got to the convoy. So, like, these people that I didn't know that were sitting in this room were shaking their head, like, in agreement with me, and I was like, "What?" I felt so validated. So then I said, "Okay, like, is the child sex trafficking thing true? Like, is this true? Like, are there kids getting in carts,
Yeah.
like, being, like, shipped?" And these things, and they're like 100%.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
And
that
I'm
was,
like,
yeah, I don't know if you remember, and I don't want to get this wrong, so I don't want to necessarily say a specific date, but there was a point. Now, I don't know if it was during the convoy or shortly thereafter, but I think it was when, like, right before the whole war broke out there. And one point, there was a very specific statement that came out of the Ukraine to Canada. And it was basically along the lines of, hey, Trudeau or whatever, Canada, you either give us your support, right, by sending us whatever the hell you need to send us, right, or we're going to air your dirty laundry.
no, I
Okay.
don't remember that.
And yeah, so, and this was a whole other conversation that, like, we were having, we as in, like, all these like like an
Okay.
active force
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
who were like awakened to all of this.
yeah.
Because we know that a lot of the containers go through the Ukraine. We know that Canada supports it in that way. And we know that a lot of the children that get trafficked, even in the Middle East, are coming out of conflict rich environments. So like that is literally what, like, funds the war.
So, like, in Haiti, for example, all these kids, like, when the earthquake happened, like, do you think that these things, these manufactured wars, I mean, it was probably for several reasons, but in that kind of chaos, they can go and do their grabs, or like what?
Oh, 100%. Like, I'm not going to speak for Haiti because I've never actively worked in
Yeah,
Haiti,
right.
right? I don't want to say that, but I mean, the pattern would suggest that if it's happening, so it's just to remain aware that, that has always been at the root of war. And a lot of, like, people that I know who've, were like, special forces, military, really high levels and doing very, very covert work. A big part of their injury is as a result of that, of knowing, like, why am I being sent to this country, especially for Canada? Okay, here's the other piece to this is like, there's so much like red tape and political bullshit, right? Where, Canada likes to pretend and say, oh, we don't get involved with, like, we don't negotiate with terrorists, or like we don't get
Yeah.
involved with war, like actual warfare where we're out there like killing people. And anyway, so there's so much garbage that is put out there. A lot of these men that I have spoken to who literally have said, where it's like, well, I don't even know what the hell we're at war for. I don't even know why, like, I'm sent in here when all we need to do is just stop the human trafficking.
Mm.
Right. And this is a big thing in Africa. This was like a big part of West Africa, and understanding the greater issue. So, like, we're being sent in for whatever we think we're being sent in for, right? And we're potentially supporting, another country in a different way, whether that's through intelligence, whether that's through whatever. And of course, there's like the people that are playing at the top, like using the puppets, and they all know. And this is like, that's why I keep saying, like, why do you think the clearances are so high, right? Like top secret,
Mm.
you know, all these, like, and more, like gamma clearance, and like, and more. It's because, like, you are literally sworn, like, you will lose your job, right, if you speak to anything that you witness at a lot of those, like, top levels. um so many, it's like so many things. So yeah, human trafficking is literally at the root of funding all of this.
And then we have these systems, and this is why I say, and it's not to say that kids like aren't going to want to go back to school at some time. Like my 13-year-old, he wants to have a little bit of a school experience, so we're kind of looking at some options. But it's when we understand the depths of, like you call it, the systemic deception. Why would I want my kids in that? These people at the top, that have created the structure in this way, in this compartmentalized way, like you said, these higher clearances, like humanity is literally controlled in this manner, which is
Oh,
a carbon copy of the public government run school system to train you to be ready to go into these systems. And it's like, we have to break free from the system. We have to get out of these schools, our
yeah.
children out of these schools. We have to completely start something new, community minded, local, small, keep them with us. It's the most natural thing, until they're tweens and teenagers and they want to explore a bit more. Okay. But, wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that is the whole thing. It's, like a big part, especially like when I work with first responders, which I was doing a lot more at the beginning part of like my service work. Um, you know, we become, part of the government, or part of the service work and all these things, right? Because at one time, and I want to say this is like 99% true across the board, okay? And there's always the one that it might not be true for, but we have gone through our own inner child wounding in such a way that it expresses, like, there's like these threads of our actual spirit and soul and what we've come here to do, that kind of like intertwines with our wounding and our trauma and our like inner child disconnect, right? And it kind of comes in together, and you're like, I want to save the world. I want to save you. I want to fix you. I want to help, right? So it is coming from a pure place, but it's the way that it becomes. So then what happens is, like, there's this programming we go through as young children, through the school system, through our family systems, through the government system. It's like, be a good girl, be a good boy, don't speak up, like, da 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 da, all the things, right? That then, and then it's like, it's a recognized, I almost want to call it this, it's hard to give word to, but at a subconscious level, when we endure trauma, or whether that's a big T trauma or a small T trauma, subconsciously, when we're young, okay, and we endure this trauma, when it is not healed, right? We then, as we grow, are actually attracted to, at a subconscious level, an environment that feels familiar, right? Even though it could be toxic, but it feels familiar because that is what was learned, that is what was experienced, right? And it's until we understand, because this also plays out in the system, is that if I grew up in a way that was like almost tyrannical or authoritarian or whatever, I'm literally going to feel comfortable in an environment in my later adult years that is very controlling.
Mm-hmm.
So the unschooling and the unravel and the pattern recognition has to start at a foundational level to really understand, like, wait a minute, whose voice is that? Like, that's not my truth,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Listening to that inner critic. We talk a lot about that. We've been reading and talking about the books from Miguel Riaz and the Toltec tradition, and just, the inner critic, the voice of knowledge, which is a liar. And, and just even as parents being aware of, like, why am I saying no right now? Why am I telling my kid I need to do this? Why am I coercing them to do this? Is that me, or is that the program of me training my kids? Because that's how I've been trained. Am I worried about outside, you know, um, pressure here in this situation, right? Just starting to really unpack some of that stuff. Well, Selvia, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your light and your path with our community. I know they're going to be super interested, and I'm glad. I actually should have talked to you about this at the beginning. Now we're on the community part, because my membership's a private community association, so it's got safeguards against government and the public domain. So we can share whatever, and it stays in the
Yeah.
community. But forgot to say to you, oh, can I talk about that thing with your RCMP and that thing? And then should I talk about that publicly? So anyway,
Yeah.
but I think we got the best of both worlds, where we can kind of share your story on the public platform, and then kind of go a little more in depth. So yeah, so I'll have all your information up for everybody in the notes in the community as well. If you are, and I would love you to catch up with us again, and hear when you get back, if you get back, where you're going, what you're doing. Maybe you want to join our community, be part of the Unschooling Mamas, and
Gosh,
um,
yeah. I'm gonna need help with that because I'm
yeah.
like, they're not going back to the public system whatsoever. I know there's like a lot of different, like I've been researching some stuff and unschooling in the Ontario region, and
Yeah,
uh, free learning, and there's so many things now that were not there 2 years ago, right?
true. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely looking at different. I'm open to,
open.
yeah, I need
Yeah,
some support.
definitely
So
reach out to us. Definitely reach out to us. We have a lot of mamas that are from Ontario in our community. Well, really from all over the world, but it's more a mindset than anything else. And then finding things that you not fill the kids' time, but are their interests and their passions, and just knowing that we're not alone. This is a revolution of reclamation of bringing our kids our sovereign right to, educate our kids the way they see fit, not even the way we see fit, but just keeping them out of these systems that are designed, like you said, it's like, um, it's not life-giving, it's life-taking.
yeah, totally.
It's
And that's, so that is the piece, right?
mm,
Life force. And like
life force.
everything falls around life force. Are you getting it siphoned from you?
Mm-hmm.
Are you giving it away? Because again, subconscious, like we don't know, because that's what it feeds on.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is
Mm-hmm.
what those powers of oppression and suppression and control feed on your life force,
Yeah,
right?
it's so
So
true.
yeah, and that is because the purest form of life force is through children.
Mm. That's why they're always under attack.
Okay. So like, I mean, again, I can totally get into that, but it's just to understand that. And it's like, okay, wait a minute, how do I reclaim? How do I return my life force? And when you really start unraveling that and understanding how many ways we do things, and just how divinely designed the body is, like biologically and physiologically, like by design, what we're actually meant and capable of evolving into versus what we're doing to ourselves every
Yeah.
day through, right? The all the poor habits and things that are being like pumped into us through the systems.
Yeah, and the people that rule us know us that, and then they keep the information hidden from us. I mean, it is such a trip. Well, I'm
Yeah.
just so glad there's other mamas and other people all over the world around that I'm connecting with, and meeting you has been great because it's like, okay, yeah, no, I, I'm not crazy, and we're gonna get through this together.
Yeah.
So I will send you a copy of everything or little clips that I make, and I'll tag you on your Instagram, and we'll keep in touch for sure. Okay.
Thank you so, so much. Thank you. I just
Yeah.
wish you, yeah, definitely we're gonna keep in touch. So
You look great. I got to get out and get some sun. We haven't seen sun up here in the mountains for weeks and weeks. Like it's,
oh my gosh.
I think it's the
Yeah, there's
sun's
some sun.
just coming out, so I got to get out there and get some. You look amazing. You're like glowing in Costa Rica, and I'm like, oh my god, I need sun. All I get is
It's
chemtrails
the
and snow.
sweat. It's the sweat
Yeah,
that
yeah,
glows.
yeah. That's good. That's good though.
Yeah.
Okay, hon. Well, we'll
All
talk to
right.
you again soon. Have an awesome day, and thanks for joining us. Okay,
Thank you.
bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, friends. If you like the content that I am producing amongst a sea of censorship, please like, review, and share. If you are looking for support to pull your kids from the system and start your own Unschooling the Mind journey with an international online community of like-minded souls who are doing the same thing as you, head over to my website at tashafishman.com for all the details. To create strong communities right where you are, it starts with you. Thank you. Clear eyes, open heart, can't lose. See you next time.